Act One of Crossings, a Fairy Play, by Walter de la Mare. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Crossings, a Fairy Play. Characters:
Mr. Charles James Wildersham. Read by Larry Wilson.
Sarah or Sally, his first daughter, read by Emma Hatton.
Frances or France, his second daughter, read by T.J. Burns.
Anthony or Tony, his son, read by Thomas Peter.
Anne, his third daughter, read by Campbell Shelp.
Miss Agatha Wildersham, his sister and their aunt, of Bayswater, read by Carol Pelster.
Reverend Jeremy Welcome, vicar of Little Crossings and a friend of the children's aunt, Susan, who is dead, read by Eva Davis.
Miss Julia Welcome, his sister, read by Avai.
Josephine,
their niece,
read by Linda Olsen Freitag.
Lady Minch of the Hall, Great Crossings, read by Anita Sloma Martinez.
Mr. Josiah Widge, the cabman of Little Crossings, read by Scotty Smith.
Mr. John Budge, the butcher of Little Crossings, read by Nemo.
Mrs. Budge, read by Nicalia.
Jemima Budge, their small daughter, also called Polly, read by Tricia G.
Mr. William Honeyman, the baker of Little Crossings, read by Lynette Calkins.
Mrs. Honeyman, read by Elsie Selwyn.
Emily Honeyman, their small daughter, read by Devorah Allen.
The Candlestick Maker of Nowhere, read by Chuck Williamson.
Beggarman
of Everywhere,
read by Elsie Selwyn.
The Queen of the Fairies, read by The Story Girl.
Fairies, Numberless and Innumerable, read by Nicalia Schwartz.
Mrs. Marshall,
the Family's Cook,
read by Elsie Selwyn.
Stage directions read by Todd. Act 1. Aunt Agatha and Bayswater. Time: a foggy Saturday afternoon, the 7th of December. Scene: a large, draughty, forbidding drawing-room with a small fire in it, in Bayswater. On the left is a lofty window, casting, with its draperies, a dim and stagnant light into the room. High doors painted in shades of brown are to the right and between the window and the bleak marble chimney-piece. On a stool in front of the vast brass fender squats Anne, a child aged about 5, with all her dolls. Her hair is parted in the middle, and severely plaited on either side of her smooth round cheeks. It is of the rarest, fairest tinge of gold. Her Aunt Agatha has designed her clothes. She peeps out of her body as if out of a cupboard. Sally, a slim dark girl of 17, with a gentle mobile face, is seated before an old-fashioned black piano as the curtain slowly rises. She speaks in a low, clear voice, and as if out of her thoughts. Her hair is drawn back tightly from her forehead. Her Aunt Agatha has chosen her clothes. Anne, to her dolls:
"Now you must be as quickerly quiet as a mouse, Oddsbodikins. Samivel, you mustn't whoop, please. Sally's going to sing you to sleep."
She rocks her favorite and ugliest doll, Sarah, to her breast. Sally, in faintly tragic mockery, sings:
"Break, break, break, on the cold gray stones, oh, see!"
then twists the accompaniment off into the first 4 bars of Sally in Our Alley. She stoops over the keys. Silence. Without, the lamplighter lights the lamp.
"What shall I sing, Mummykins? The fog's in my throat."
"Sometimes, Sally, you sing such extremely sad songs. They make Oddsbodikins cry, they do. Cough the old frog out."
Sally sings:
"Dark-browed sailor, tell me now, where is Arbury? The tide's aflow, the wind a-blow, 'tis I who pine for Arbury. Master, she her spices showers, o'er 99 leagues of sea, the laden air breeze faint and rare, dreams on far distant Arbury." Oh, but sailor, tell me true, 'twas man who mapped this arbory. Though dangers brew, let me and you embark this night for Arbury. Wails the wind from star to star, rock the loud waves their dirge, and see, through foam and wrack, a boat drift back. Ah, heart beguiling Arbury.
Towards the conclusion of the song, appears in the doorway on the left, and, chin on ample bosom, stands listening in rapt solemnity to Sally's strains, Mrs. Marshall, the family's cook. She is of the shape of a tub, has a little bonnet on her head, and carries an immense brown paper parcel, a pelican-handled umbrella, a bulging hand-bag, etc. The music ceases. The fog darkens. Mrs. Marshall, pensively wagging her head,
Music have charms, Miss Sally, but a mournful, lugubrious song for your young years, with them harebrained young fellows gone and drowned, in an empty boat, though not as I ever much envied my poor sister at Southend, shrimps, niggers, and all. I've come, Miss Sally, to take my departure, and your aunt not at home, as wasn't to be expected, to shake the dust off my feet, and the silver counted 3 times, and not an egg spoon missing.
Oh, Miss Marshall, don't say such things. I simply can't believe it. What shall we do without you?
Why, there, Miss Sally, partin's a partin', and you can't drag nobody back, even in a land of so-called Christians, once they're gone, which isn't what I'm hoping to do yet awhile, never having been a rolling stone nor set much store by moss. What I'm saying is, Lord forbid I should complain. Light work I never found, too kept to 20, and me a scullery maid in a nobleman's family when I was scarcely out of my cradle. 15 years, and your poor mother and all. I've seen you a growing up like grains of mustard seed. And but there, it's not for me to be throwing stones in glassed houses. I'm going to my daughter's, Miss Sally, my Rosie's, to a home, which in Bayswater cannot be found, referring only in a manner of speaking to number 8.
Yes, yes, Miss Marshall, I know.
Not that I'm working about in my words to deny that your aunt means well, Miss Sally, though I never knew anybody what meant well worse. But theirs are heavenly courses, miss, and neither here nor there.
With a prolonged shake of her large, little bonneted head, she waddles over to Anne.
Goodbye, and God's precious be with you. You poor small innocent bundle of motherless love and your babies and all.
She hugs Anne to her capricious bosom.
Goodbye, darling cook. I loves you, I do.
Bless your sweet blue heavenly eyes, and maybe you'll come and have a bit of dripping toast to your tea with your old Miss Marshall when your poor pa's his own man again.
To Sally.
There, Miss Sally, you're looking peaked and wan in your pretty cheeks, and nobody that can be called a man to watch the roses fade, but the proof of the pudding's in the eating, and may the Lord be a comfort to you all.
She is going out, when Frances, a tall, straight, reddish, boyish girl of about 14, in a large checked coat, strides in, carrying a parcel.
Cooksy comes! Faithless, perjured Cooksy comes! Only just in time! Unkind, unnatural creature! You were actually going without saying goodbye to me? And here I've been lavishing all my fortune on you.
She rapidly exposes the contents of her parcel.
Yes, slippers. Bedroom slippers.
Oh, miss.
The very largest in stock, the man said. Roomy. And made especially in 2 layers for private wear in bed. Take them, ungrateful thing, before I dissolve into tears.
Oh, but Miss Frances, you shouldn't, Miss Frances. I couldn't, Miss Frances.
But you must, and you must. I insist. I'll be hurt. I'll howl. I'll tear my hair. I'll jump up the chimney. I'll give them to Aunt Agatha.
Oh, but really, Miss Frances, you shouldn't. I couldn't. You shouldn't. I couldn't.
They go out, wrestling and disputing. Their voices die away. Anne, ponderingly,
We haven't any friends now, have we, Sally?
My dear.
She goes over to the fire and kneels down beside Anne. Frances returns, ruffled but triumphant.
It's a shame, Sally. A wicked, poisonous shame. She was positively crying, her tears all salt down my back. To think of it, Emma gone, cook gone.
She seizes the poker and plunges it into the fire.
A pig! A perfect, incomparable pig.
Sally, glancing nervously at the door.
Shh! Francis, think what you are saying. She may be in at any moment, and you know we are not allowed to poke the fire.
Anne, sagely staring.
If you poke that fire, France, it'll go out, it will.
France, dear, we must try and be patient.
Patient, Aunt Agatha? It's sheer tyranny. Sheer black medieval evil tyranny. Look at the guys she makes of us. I won't be a slave. What right has she to practice her silly old theories on us?
In an icy, superior voice.
Education, Francis, means to lead out. So it does, on a chain. Some day she shall see. Even if I can't bark, I can bite.
But France, dear, what is the use?
We do nothing. We see nobody. We never so much as poke our noses out into the world. We are just bits of dumb, ugly old furniture. Like you, old forelegs.
She leans forward, whispering hotly.
Last night, Sally, I lay awake thinking. And I made up my mind. I just made up my mind that sooner than growing up Aunt Agatha's way, I'd cut off this wretched old pigtail, jump out of the window, and run away to sea. I want to see things. I want to do things. I want to go all round this oblate old spheroid and up the other side. I can't breathe in this cage.
If you went and jumped out of the window, France, you'd break your leg. When the Dawsons' housemaid fell out of the window, she broke all her legs.
You know, Francis dearest, it is useless to grumble. I agree there isn't much liberty. I might be still in the nursery for all I can see, and now even Miss Marshall's gone. But there...
She dabs her handkerchief at her nose.
No quoss, no crown, France.
Anne, cheerfully to her Sarah.
No quoss, no crown, Sarah.
What's more, my dear, but you mustn't breathe a single word. Life may be going to be an adventure, after all. Father's been talking to me. He is most dreadfully worried about money matters. He doesn't think we can possibly stay on here. And now, a letter's come.
She glances over her shoulder, listens a moment, then whispers.
We may be going away.
Sally, going away? Where? When? How?
Into the country, to a house in the country.
Frances leaps to her feet.
A house in the country? Sarah! My Sal! Oh, Marble Halls! Oh, Bayswater! Beloved aunt, farewell!
Will there be paddling, Sally?
Not paddling, mummykins, but woods and fields and haystacks and cows and geese and rocks. Moo, moo! Gobble, gobble! Caw, caw! And Christmas, Nan, holly and mistletoe, and icicles, and real white country snow.
To Frances.
Of course, nothing can be settled until Aunt Agatha agrees. And it's not quite certain whether she won't come with us.
Frances, loringly.
She shan't, Sally. Poppy and mandragora and all the drowsy syrups. But where, you black-locked angel, where?
It's Aunt Susan's house. Crossings, where Mother was a little girl. Poor Aunt Susan died a few weeks ago, you know, and I think the house has been left to Father in her will. I see it. Francis, it all comes darkly stealing in.
But my dear, this is what's called in the books Eureka. This is bliss. No more prep, no more algebra, no more scales in that musty, fusty old practice room. No more when I was your age. This loathsome den. Oh, Sally, Sally, it can't be true.
To hide her emotion, she buries her face in her skirts and breaks into an extravagant keening. Tony appears, a schoolboy, about 13. He has forgotten to take off his too capricious top hat and is carrying an umbrella and a battered portmanteau.
My child, these tears, what can't be true? She's not...
He points a solemn kid-gloved finger towards the zenith.
A better place?
Sally, horror-stricken.
Tony, you've run away?
Tony, imitating his aunt.
Alas, my poor Sarah, no. Merely mumps.
Mumps.
Mumps?
What's mumps, Tony, please?
What, oh, Sister Anne? You're glad to see your poor, old, half-starved Tony, ain't you?
Hands in pockets, he broods over the fire. The others join him, and they presently sit in a row, their backs turned on the world at large. Tony continues, sententiously,
All the other fellows, dancing their eyes out. Billy Bones made a rag up about it.
He chants dolorously.
When bread's a sawdust, and suets and lumps, and every man jack of you's down in the dumps, then hey for chicken pox, hi for whooping cough, ho for measles and mumps. Not much fun coming home here, sisters mine. Where is she? Marooned in the fog? You can't see a cab horse outside until you are stunned by his nose bag. And Sally, has a letter come?
Anne, solemnly,
We're going away, Tony. Crossings, Tony. Moo, moo. Gobble, gobble. Caw-caw.
Sally and Frances nod violently. Tony, incredulously,
Gobble, gobble. I know. Good for geese.
Sally and Frances nod more violently.
Well, going away. What of it, you chuckle-headed mandarins, if she's coming?
It's not really quite settled yet, Tony. And you mustn't breathe even a single syllable. But I feel in my bones it will be something, well, different. There's no doubt we are a very bad and stupid family. But I do think it can be good for one to never be allowed to do a single wicked thing for a decent reason. It makes life a kind of trap. Father's in it too, you know, poor dear. But so is Aunt Agatha for that matter. Just cages.
Cages? Even a miserable canary has a lump of sugar now and then.
Cook told Emma that sometimes men put little birds' eyes out to make them sing. That's cruel, that is.
They crouch in a desolate bundle over the sinking fire. Silence. Enter, soundlessly, Miss Wildersham. She is the portrait of which the Bayswater drawing-room is the frame. Followed by Mr. Wildersham, she surveys the scene.
Most refreshing. A really happy family. What was I saying, Charles? How poor Susan would have enjoyed the picture.
The children start up simultaneously and stand in a dumb glum row facing her.
I am loath to disturb you, children, but I must remind you, Sarah, that it's 5 minutes past 6, and that Anne is not in bed. I must remind you, Frances, that your face is the color of a red Indian's, and that you are not doing your preparatory work. And I must remind you, Anne, that only one doll is allowed at one time in the drawing-room, and apparently someone has been disturbing the fire.
Frances vanishes. Tony fumbles for his portmanteau and begins to edge furtively towards the door. Sally, with a deep sigh.
Yes, Aunt Agatha.
Anne, having made a wild clutch at her dolls, is led off. She breaks into a steady, dismal yell.
Oh, Sally! Samivel! Samivel! You know he's got whooping cough.
Mr. Wildersham sinks, with a groan, into an armchair. Tony's fist has closed upon the door-handle. His aunt sweeps round upon him.
And pray, Anthony, what brings you home with your hat and your umbrella and your portmanteau?
Mumps.
Oh, mumps this time, is it?
Mumps.
I sincerely trust, Anthony, it is not mumps which prevents you from pronouncing your aunt's name. Cough, boy, or blow your nose. You were going to speak to Anthony about his report, were you not, Charles?
Mr. Wildersham wearily passes the report to his sister and sits with fingers together, gloomily gazing into the fire. She adjusts her lorgnette, opens and silently reads the report, with an occasional ominous glance at Anthony. Miss Wildersham, suddenly glaring up at him with a fixed smile.
On second thoughts, Anthony, it would seemingly be advisable to discuss this remarkable document tomorrow morning at an early breakfast. Your masters appear to be of one mind that you haven't any. Your sisters might profit by it, and it will be something for us to look forward to."
Sardonically pointing to hat and portmanteau.
"And now remove these baubles. You will find bread and margarine in the kitchen, and excellent cold water in the tap. No doubt you are exhausted after the term's exertions, and would like to go to bed."
Tony goes out. He is heard in the distance, forlornly whistling, "Britons never never shall be slaves." Mr. Wildersham, poking the fire.
I cannot understand, Agatha, why this room, summer and winter, always strikes cold.
For my part, Charles, it is not the room that strikes cold. Young people do not require artificial warmth. It is this crazy legacy of Susan's. We have just surprised our fauna in their wilds. I ask you, Charles, are they the kind of creature on which to make such a demented experiment?
In common fairness, Agnes, you cannot visit Susan's eccentricities on me. She, too, had theories about the bringing up of children. So have you. She did not think that ours, had enough freedom, enough life and responsibility. Her argument was that human beings of any age who are not happy cannot be wise. By her will she leaves Crossings to me in trust for Sally and the others, on two conditions. First, that, as I have explained, they spend a complete fortnight alone here, and next, that at the end of it they themselves confess that they have been happier and have proved themselves to be wiser than they were when they left your charge. Susan seems to have entertained a touching belief in the school of experience, however high the fees may be.
School of fiddlesticks! Pray, Charles, are children intended to be happy? Is anyone who tries to do his duty happy? Am I happy? Has my sex won its rights and liberties merely to be happy? And who, may I ask, is to judge whether they are wiser? Are they?
No, that is to be the ordeal of the Vicar of Little Crossings, Mr. Jeremy Welcome.
Mr. Jeremy Welcome. What will happen? Mark my words, Charles. The children will simply run wild. They will overeat, oversleep, underdress, and do no lessons. Sarah will run up ruinous bills with the tradespeople. Her good heart, as you call it, will welcome every beggar and footpad that comes whining to the door. Francis will read trashy novels. Anthony will be out at all hours of the day and night. He will smoke, burn, and burrow. Crossings will become a byword for miles around. As for Anne, she'll be kidnapped, or stray off into the woods and be lost. That's my prediction. I see nothing but evil wherever I look."
Mr. Wildersham, pacing up and down.
I am sorry, Agatha. It is not exactly a cheerful view. I am immensely grateful to you. You have mothered the motherless. But, well, think of my position. Servants gone, income going. This house is impossible. We cannot, I am well aware, have you always with us. However crazy the scheme, I have no choice. To refuse would be neither fair nor prudent. Besides, I confess I am a little curious. I am anxious to see what the children will make of their opportunity. Let me be candid. I am restless, ill at ease. Susan's letter has brought the old times back to me. Crossings.
He casts his eyes toward the ceiling.
I begin to doubt this house, these draperies, these angles, this still life, this appalling hush.
Draperies? Angles? Hush? What are you saying, Charles?
There is a gloom, a demoniac gloom.
A what gloom?
I said demoniac. I blame nobody. I blame...
He starts forward.
Can't you see? Can't you feel it? Ah, the very air. We are being hunted.
I implore you, Charles, control yourself. This isn't seemly.
A protracted pause. Mr. Wildersham gloats out of the window into the fog.
Enough of this fatuity. I am to understand that the children are to know nothing of this insane proposal? They are simply to be flung to the wolves. That, I gather, is another of your poor Susan's conditions.
Exactly. They are to go to Crossings alone, and to fend entirely for themselves.
He flings a cushion from one chair to another.
Liberty, equality, fraternity.
The shibboleth, I believe, of such French moralists as Rousseau and Robespierre. I wish you well of Susan. She has passed over, and my lips, unfortunately, are sealed. You have told Sally?
So far, but I must explain further.
He rings the bell, rings again, then calls out of the door on the left,
Sally.
Sally enters, her shoulders draped in an immense fringed funeral shawl.
Yes, Aunt Agatha?
And why, my dear Sarah, this charming array?
It's so cold in my room. My fingers wouldn't hold the needle, Aunt Agatha. Besides, Anne is very restless, so I was going to bed.
And where is your dressing gown?
Tony's feet were so cold.
The Good Samaritan in her prettiest shawl.
Mr. Wildersham, on his mettle at last.
The fact is, Sally, I have decided that you and the children shall all start off for Crossings on Tuesday.
Sally shuts her eyes to conceal her rapture.
Yes, father.
Your aunt, or Mrs. Dobby, may or may not come with you, or be there when you arrive. If neither comes, you will have to carry on by yourselves for a while. Does that prospect alarm you, my dear?
Sally looks at her aunt and wriggles a little closer into her shawl.
No, father.
You won't miss us, Sarah? Not much?
Miss you? Aunt Agatha? I shall indeed. And oh, Daddy!
She kneels down beside his chair and hides her face on his knee.
How I shall miss you! And I do pray things will come right. I'm holding my thumbs for you. Tight.
Please, Sarah, we are not acting a charade. Why, what's this?
Anne enters from the left in her nightgown, hugging her large, ugly doll.
Oh, be careful, Aunt Agatha. She is walking in her sleep.
Lost in dream, her eyes wide open, her right hand lifted a little into the air, Anne comes to her aunt, gropes over her dress, touches her cheek. Miss Wildersham starts back with a peculiar cry of apprehension. Anne wakes, stands staring.
Oh!
She turns away in dread and runs to Sally.
Sally, Sally, I dreamed it was a fairy.
A dark silence falls. The gas flame of the street lamp begins to leap and dip, casting unpleasing shadows into the gaunt room. Mr. Wildersham puts up his eyeglass.
On my word, Agatha, I don't like the feel of all this. To use your own word, it isn't seemly. Unreal, as if arranged, you know, like the beginning of some sentimental childish play. And yet, God knows, this is a devil-fearing household.
Miss Wildersham, motionless.
God? Charles! Devil? Charles! Do you realize who is drinking it all in?
After a last desperate gasp, the flame of the street lamp expires. Curtain. End of Act 1. Act II of Crossings, a fairy play, by Walter de la Mare. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act II, The Ghost and the Wine. Time, about 10 o'clock at night on the 10th of December. Scene: in the vague looming light of starshine and hoarfrost, the dark, low-ceilinged parlor of Crossings. Beyond its slightly bow-shaped French windows lies outspread the gentle sloping lawn of a wintry garden, skirted by woods of hazel, holly, and thorn. A young moon that has been in the heavens is set, and the winter constellations tremble there like fireflies. On the left of the room is an open hearth, with a roomy inglenook and sphinx-headed fire-dogs, and beyond the hearth is a casement window, a peeping window. A dial clock stands silent on the chimney-piece, flanked by 2 old candlesticks, and surmounted by a Queen Anne mirror, its quicksilver dimmed and foxed with age. On the nearer side of the hearth is a low, round-headed door, its twin door being to the left of a Chippendale bureau, which stands against the right wall and faces the hearth. Toward this side of the room is a spinet. Against the darkness of the curtains, motionlessly gazing into the night, is what would clearly appear to be the shape of a gentle little old woman, attired in a black silk flannel dress and a cap. Firm-lipped, round-browed, keen-eyed, she is the portrait of which this parlor at Crossings is the frame. She may once have been Miss Susan Wildersham. A thin, wind-like music stirs in the woods. It dies off into nothingness when the muffled clanking of a distant bell resounds through the house, followed after an interval by a more prolonged and violent peal. A pause. Then, beyond the windows, a decrepit 4-wheeled cab, drawn by an old knock-kneed white mare, is seen to crawl into sight and come to a standstill in the hoar-frost. Tony, in his silk hat and muffled up to the eyes, scrambles down from the box beside the cabman. He peers in at the windows. They are locked. The voices of the children are heard gabbling together in the cab. Tony disappears, and presently the little peeping window is thrust open. He is seen straddling its sill. He lights a match.
"Ahoy! Ahoy! Anybody here?"
The ghost vanishes.
"All serene, Sally. Not a squeak. Not a whisper. I'll climb in and open the door."
Whistling to give himself confidence, he clambers in through the casement and opens the French windows. Sally, Frances, and Anne, their shapes hunched up like Arctic explorers, descend from out of the cab and come slowly in. Clustered together, they stand mute, gazing as if spellbound about them.
How ghostly! How ghostly, Sally!
Sally, to herself.
A dream. Always.
Tony, opening a door.
"Ahoy! Ahoy! Anybody here?"
Oh, Tony, hush! The echo! Besides, we don't know for certain. Aunt Agatha may be somewhere, you know? The train was hours and hours late.
To herself.
It couldn't have come too slowly. Utterly still, as if one had been lost and found. Look, Frances, it is as if the frostlight, floated in the air. And oh, a spinet like Mrs. Somerset's. What I have been longing for ages and ages.
She runs her fingers over the tinkling ivory keys, and as if in echo, the wood music wells faintly into the room. Frances stealthily pushes ajar the further door. Frances, to herself.
Dark enough there. Sally, I tell you what, nobody would know it who wasn't here. It isn't true.
Please, Sally, will you pull down this horrid shawl from my mouth? I can't be seeing nothing, and my breath's wetted the wool.
Anne slowly revolves as Sally unwinds her gray scarf and shawl, revealing the child at last in her Bayswater livery. Tony, meanwhile, tiptoes about in his heavy boots, lighting candles. He crouches, match in hand, over the hearth.
Tony, a fire, in the dead of night. What would Aunt Agatha say?
I like this place, I do. This is the house where I was born.
The others bow themselves down in laughter, their hands over their mouths.
I'm just as hungry as a wolf. If I don't get something to eat this very minute, I shall expire into a corpse. How perfectly lovely the flames make everything, as if 100,000,000,000 eyes are twinkling at us. Come along, Tony. Allons savant. Let's explore.
Oh!
Mr. Widge, the prehistoric cabman of Little Crossings, has suddenly deposited a huge trunk on the floor. In a 7-caped ulster he stands, like Ararat, awaiting his fare.
Oh, Mr. Cabman, is that you? I am pleased to see you again.
She searches feverishly in her pockets and little handbag.
Do you know, I think, Mr. Cabman, a most curious thing. I think I must have packed my purse in the trunk. There's nothing like keeping things safe, is there? Even when you are absent-minded. Please sit down. You must be positively frozen up there in the cold.
Mr. Widge, sardonically.
Frozen, miss? Not Mr. Widge, miss. Too thick through. The last time we come along here, we were taking somebody out, we were, which butter wouldn't melt in the poor lady's mouth. God bless 'ee. Leaves nobody, they don't.
A spectral wail of music drifts in on the air. The old mare lifts her head and neighs.
Whoa there! That's my old Polly, that is, starving in the frost. Bandboxes, Odemars, tips and tops and riticules there might have been, but that poor dead and gone Miss Susan were a lady, she were. I'll wait outside.
A dubious whinnying rises faint and shrill out of the midst of the woods. The children stand, stock still, listening. Anne trots off to the little window, mounts a chair, and looks out. Tony, boldly.
Only the wind. That means snow. Come along, Francis.
They emerge furtively through the door to the right, carrying candles. Sally takes Anne to the fire and sits her in the inglenook.
There, mummykins, warm your 10 toes. There state good Queen Bess, oh, a-shining on her throne. Up Jessie, down Docket, my money's gone. Another brandy ball? 1, 2, and in goes you.
Anne, crunching up her brandy ball.
If we were all to wake up here, Sally, everything would be a dream.
Wake up, mummykins. We mustn't. We just simply mustn't. I couldn't bear it.
She ecstatically whisks up a candlestick, then pauses, drops a solemn, half-mocking little curtsy as if to someone in her mind, and kneels down before the trunk.
Now for the purse. My gracious goodness, if I had lost it.
She pulls a large key out of her bodice by a black ribbon, unlocks the trunk, and pushes back its red-lined canvas lid. The voices of Francis and Tony are heard within, hollowly calling. One by one, Sally tugs out Anne's dolls.
There, Nan, Sarah, Samaville, Elspeth, Oddbodkins. Poor Oddbodkin's nose is the least bit flattened, and which all comes of kissing the back of Sally's clothes brush.
She sits on her heels, talking to herself.
You must know, if I didn't just go on talking nonsense, I simply couldn't bear it. I couldn't. And as for responsibility, you keep on saying it, but you must know it's there. All the time.
Anne, to her dolls.
Dear, dear Sarah, we's in the country, crossings now.
She suddenly crouches in as if petrified.
Please, Sally, is this a drawing room?
Sally, burrowing into the trunk and scattering out higgledy-piggledy, clothes, combs, shoes, galoshes, brushes, sponge bags, etc.
A drawing room? No.
Then I may have all my dollies here? I like this place, I do. I like places what are not drawing rooms.
She arranges her dolls in a row, their feet toward the fire. Francis and Tony return laden with spoil from the pantry and store cupboards.
She isn't.
All the little beds are made,
and not on one is auntie laid. All the little beds are made, and not on one is auntie laid. All the little beds are made, and not on one is auntie laid.
We've searched everywhere, over, under, up, and in. The sweetest, coziest, lonesomest rooms. And the kitchen, tombstone floor, enormous copper pots and pans, Jack and the Beanstalk crockery, boot jacks, warming pans, hams and cheeses, jams, jellies, and jorums, bins, bottles, and blunderby. And there, Sally, beeping and whiskering at us from where the cuckoo comes out of the clock. A mouse, my dear. It can't be real.
She blows her nose.
Excuse me, elder sister, Salina Loon. It makes me cry.
Sally, emerging once more out of the trunk like a seal out of the water.
There, I knew it was safe somewhere. Now we must pay the cabman. Will you, Tony? I think it comes best from a man.
How much?
Oh, he'd know that. And then, perhaps, don't you think give him double? He's a little outspoken, but he couldn't possibly have been kinder, could he, Francis?
Tony goes out, but hastily reappears.
I say, the old boy sitting up there in the stars like a toadstool, fast asleep, and Polly too, sighing like a grampus. Why did you open the doors?
What doors?
The cab doors.
But we didn't.
Tony, staring.
They are wide open now, and such a queer smell in the cab, like roots, bracken roots, and moss and mould, like woods, you know. There's rabbits in the garden too. One hopped out as I popped in.
Anne, to herself.
Bunnies! Bunnies!
She mounts up to the window again, making a curious little persuasive whistling noise.
Rabbits, Tony. I always thought they hibernated. Perhaps Aunt Susan used to feed them.
To herself.
And now, the cabman.
With a resolute set of her small head, she goes toward the window, but is transfixed midway by the discovery, on a low stool under the curtains, of an infinitesimal greenish bottle filled with a pale green liquor, and, set round about it, minute goblets. Out in this comparative darkness, their crystal gleams strangely, like concentrated starlight.
France, quick! Did you ever see anything so perfectly magical and lovely? I think we never noticed them before.
The children gather round the little stool, gazing. Anne, nodding her head.
I know what that is, Sally. That's what the little dwarfses were drinking in the picture of Snow White.
Frances pours a trickle of the wine into one of the goblets, and lifts it to her nose.
Smell, Sally. Like wild roses, honeysuckle.
No, wood violets. I can't think. We mustn't taste it.
Tony, sniffing.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
That makes Nan's head go round, that does. That smells like honey.
Balancing the glass a little dizzily, Tony tiptoes out to rouse the cabman. Mr. Widge follows him in, cocking a drowsy eye at the little glass held up to his nose in his enormous red-mittened fist. With a sustained wink at Tony, he drains it at a gulp, and subsides instantly into a profound reverie. Mr. Widge, as if out of a swoon.
Now, what I says is this, ladies and gentlemen, leastways, one gentleman. It's 80 years and 10 or more as the crow flies since Joseph Widge were of an age when it weren't no consequence, in a manner of speaking, what kind of an age he were. So I. And now.
With infinite mournfulness.
Melted. That's why I say melted. To the very cockles. It's round us. Round us. You and me and all of us. Open your eyes in your innocent craniums and see. You ask me. Well then, what I say is, maybe Crossings Woods is Crossings Woods. Trees, in a manner of speaking, sticking up out of the ground, t'other by which, criss-cross and the more the merrier. And yet, ladies and gentlemen.
He stoops almost double, his head thrust out of his capes.
There's more there than what meets the eye. As for its being dead of night and so cold as you can't count your bones snapping, and you all packed tight as little fishes in my old cab, not to mention the luggage, why, 25 shillings, miss, and thank you kindly, which is less than half price, and not a naypenny for the toddlums. And when me old friend Widge says, there, he means...
Raising his capes like a vulture.
Everywhere.
Sally, with a deep sigh.
Everywhere, Mr. Widge. Thank you, Mr. Widge. I'm sure that must be very reasonable.
She counts out the money into his hand. He is groping his way out when Anne tugs him by the sleeve.
That's a brandy ball, Mr. Widge. That's for poor Polly out in the cold.
Mr. Widge, stretching out his hand, on which lies the brandy ball, beams round on them all like a winter sunset.
May him who made the very first horse that munched oats in the ark bless your kindly nature, Missikins. fold a roll, fold a roll, fold a roll, oh, and good night, all.
Good night, Mr. Widge.
The sound of the cab rolling away dies out in the frozen silence. Sally, apprehensively,
Would you ever believe, France, that the least little drop of wine like that in that enormous cabman? We must be very, very careful of it.
Tony, pouring out some private decoction from a great saucepan on the fire.
Come along, children, supper.
Sally and Frances sit themselves on the floor by the hearth. Anne, meanwhile, has secretly licked out the last flavor of the wine from Mr. Widge's glass, and stands, eyes shut, smacking her lips. When she opens them again, she discovers a little letter, cockhat shape, that has fallen off the table onto the floor. She sits down and examines it in the frostlight. Sally, uneasily,
25 shillings. It seems a good deal, France, for half price, you know, and not counting Nan. Still, the cabman would know best, though Father said a most curious thing. I was thinking of him just now, and of Aunt, and, you know, and trying to really hope she was being as happy as we are. And I simply couldn't remember her name.
Tony, his mouth full of biscuit.
Susan, silly.
Frances, mopping her face.
I do wish you'd swallow your own crumbs, Tony.
No, not Aunt Susan. Bayswater. That aunt. It's the smell of that curious wine, I suppose. And all I can just remember is that it began with an A.
Tony, steadily.
I love my aunt with an A because she's amiable and all a-blowing and a-growing. I hate her with an A because she's angelic, angular, and aristocratic. I took her to the Sign of the Ape and alligator and treated her to artichokes and ash. Her name is Anne,
sneezing in the cold at the window.
A tissue.
They all burst out laughing. Anne creeps over behind Sally and puts her hands over her eyes.
I saw a star then, Sally. Enormous star. It wonked at Anne out of the wood. And there was a... What do you think? 3 guesses, Sally.
A pair of glass slippers.
No.
A gin in a bottle?
No.
I can't think. Tell me, Mummykins. I'm seeing such Catherine wheels in my head.
A letter, Sally, from the fairies. Look.
A letter, and addressed to me. Miss Sarah Wildersham, Crossings. Who could it be from?
She opens it and looks for the signature.
France, Tony, what a sorrowful thing. It's from Aunt Susan. As if...
She reads it aloud.
My dear Sally, I write these lines in the room in which I hope you will read them, though when, I do not know. Not very far away, perhaps. They are to say, how do you do to you all, and welcome, and to tell you not to be much cast down by the little troubles and cares of this world, and especially if you bring such troubles on yourselves. Have courage and walk straight through them, everyone. Your dear mother was my only sister, and what I am hoping is that you will all be comfortable in this little old house where she and I were born, and where we spent our childhood together. Be as happy as you may, and as wise as you can, and be these both together. Saturday's child worked hard for a living, but I expect she had a little rest on Sunday. There, that isn't a very long sermon, is it? Goodbye, my dear Sally, and I send you and your sisters and your brother my regard and affection, and remain your affectionate Aunt Susan. P.S. A kiss for little Anne.
Sally sits, stooping low over the letter. She draws Anne close and kisses her.
There, precious, precious Mummykins, I give you Aunt Susan's kiss, and we will try to make each other happy, won't we?
Tony, ladling out black-currant jam with a large wooden spoon.
We will. What's more, Sally, there's nobody here, so it looks as if we were going to be alone for a bit, so we must share out the work. I'll do the fires, and perhaps the boots and chop down the trees, and chop up the logs, and explore, and pluck the poultry.
I'll make the beds, and look after the larder, and do all the cooking. Potatoes in their jackets, Tony, and dripping toast, and mince pies, and tipsy cake.
And I'll help in everything, and do the mending, and the housekeeping, and the tradesmen, and look after Mummykins.
And Anne will polish up all the candlesticks and all the coal scuffles and wind up all the clocks. Please, Sally, may I wind up all the clocks now?
Very soon, Mummykins.
And keep them an hour slow in the mornings, and 2 hours slow in the evening. Jiminy, France, if it hadn't been for the mumps.
Sally, broodingly.
I didn't think, France, I could ever be so happy. On the very verge, you know. It's as if one had died, and how strangely still the house is, and the cold, starry garden. I had hardly dare breathe.
Time is so queer. 6 hours ago, we were kissing poor father goodbye under that hideous old portico. 6 hours ago, it was Bayswater. Can you believe that the house is there? There now? What is to prove it isn't a dream? I think, Sally, if I were to wake up now in Bayswater, I should never forgive myself. I should just numb off like stone in my bed.
Who knows, France? Perhaps we are just people in a story.
Then us will all be changed into wild swans, Sally, and fly away over the trees to the sea.
She rocks herself to and fro as if she heard the unending lullaby of the tides.
I say, I'm getting the creeps.
Sally, scrambling to her feet.
So am I, Tony. If we go on moaning like this, we shall fall asleep in real earnest. Look at the muddle, all mine. Come along, France. Come along, Tony. We must keep the house as if Aunt Susan were coming back the very next minute. I'll tidy, and you go and choose the bedrooms. And don't you think, France, as it's so warm and cozy here by the fire, we might, just tonight, make a little bed for Mummykins in that chair, and I'll curl up on the settle. Would you like that, Nan?
Anne, out of a huge yawn.
Please, Sally. Then you and me'll wake up and see the moon shining and hear the wind.
Sally busies herself about the room. Frances and Tony, laden with clothes out of the trunk, go off with candles by the door at the left. Sally undresses Anne to her petticoats, swathes her up in a big dressing gown, and tucks her up in an armchair.
There, you sweet old Sallykins, only joy, so sleepy. Say prayers, and Sally shall sing you a hush-a-bye on that queer little old piano.
With little ceremonious gestures, she one by one blows out the candles. Anne nods. Sally is just about to sit down at the spinet when Frances's voice is heard calling her from above. She goes out. The long, low room is lit now only by the smoldering firelight. In its further shadowiness becomes visible the ghostly figure that appeared to be in watch for the children. Suddenly Anne starts out of her first sleep with a cry, wriggles up into her chair, and kneeling with sleep-ridden eyes, peers over the top of it at the interloper, who smiles gently at her out of a quiet old peaceful face.
Do you live here, if you please? You must be very, very lonely all alone. You're standing extremely far off from the fire. Please come and warm yourself.
The ghost lightly raises her hands as if unwilling or forbidden to approach nearer. Anne frowns and rubs her eyes.
Anne can't see you all the time because her eyes go round and round.
Sally comes softly in. Anne, to Ghost.
Why now, she's gone.
Sally puts her arms about the child.
There, Nan, there. You are dreaming, sweetheart.
Anne, indignantly.
I'm not dreaming, Sally. She smiled at me, she did. But, oh, so lonely.
Sally, whispering and glancing uneasily over her shoulder.
Who, my sweet? Who is lonely? Where?
Anne, drooping to sleep again, and muttering drowsily.
The little old lady, of course. And you said you would sing to me.
The small, plaintive voice ebbs into silence. Sally covers the child up, then, lifting her candle, opens the door opposite to that by which Frances had gone out, and calls faintly.
Who is that? Please, is anyone there?
Silence. She locks the door, then lifts her candle higher, peers toward the dark window, and mocks in a small voice at her reflection there.
Ghosts indeed. Silly Sally, silly Sally.
She kneels down for a moment or two beside Anne, then seats herself at the spinet. The tinkling keys sound like a faintly cantankerous voice reawakened out of a quiet centuries old. She sings.
Now silent falls the cackling mill, sweet, sweeter smells the briar, the dew wells big on bud and twig, the glowworms wrapped in fire. Then sing lowly, lowly with me, and softly, lee la lo, love. 'Tis high time and wild time, and no time, no love. The western sky has veiled her rose, the night wind to the willow sigheth, now lovely lean thy head, thy tresses be my pillow. Then sing lowly, lowly with me, and softly, lee la lo, love. 'Tis high time and wild time, and no time, no love. Cries in the brake, bells in the sea, the moon o'er moor and mountain curdles her light from height to height, bedazzles pool and fountain, leaf, fox, hoot, owl, whale, warbler sweet. 'Tis midnight's now a brewing, the fairy mob is all aboard, and witches at their wooing. Then sing lully lully with me, and softly, lee la lo, love. 'Tis high time and wild time, and no time, no love.
During the last refrain, the nearer door has stealthily opened, admitting Frances, attired in a high-frilled bedcap, swaying balloon-like skirts, and silks and shawls sheening with as many colors as Joseph's coat. She twirls in a soundless pirouette to the music. Sally turns and sees her.
France, how you startled me.
Sally, Sally, my angel, my own. I could dance the eyes out of my head. You could have no notion how that tinkle, tinkle, tinkle skips, echoing up in those hundreds of little old empty rooms and corridors. Empty and empty. Sleep? Not me. Dream this side, say I, when you can.
But France, you mad thing, what on earth have you on?
Well, I was just sick to death of Aunt Bayswater's taste in frocks. Oh, how they jeered at me at school. It really is very queer. I discovered that if you turn them inside out like this, and mercy, what isn't inside out in this delicious old topsy-turvy dream of a house? You look so... It means, Sally, that even Aunt's dressmaker must have rebelled.
But the nightcap and those marvelous shawls.
All out of the wardrobe in the third little room down the corridor, past the enormous bowl of potpourri on the teeny-tiny windowsill, looking out at the dovecote. One was cooing, Sally, like this. Coo, coo, as if to that nimble of moon we saw in the train that sunk down under the woods.
But you never saw such a sight.
But I have seen such a sight. In the long looking-glass. That's what frightened me, Sally.
She lays her finger on her lip with wide-open eyes.
Frightened you? What?
Why, I could have vowed I saw an old, smiling, ghostly face peering into the glass with me over my shoulder.
Sally, to herself.
And Anne, too. But, my dear, it's friendly. The house, the wind, the very tick of that old clock out there, even the cabman's old white rattle-ribbed pulley. They are friendly, France, and if we only love them enough, I feel in the very bones of me that they'll love us too. Inside out. That's it. And I'll be dashed, France, if we don't go out and do the same. Why shouldn't we? Oh, how I've wasted myself. It's freedom, and tomorrow may never come. But hush, we mustn't wake Anne.
As soon as she is gone, Frances, laying her hands upon the air, is once more beginning to rotate, when Tony abruptly appears as if straight out of the Arabian Nights, a Turkish towel for a turban round his head, an old scimitar stuck in his silk sash, his face as black as a chimney. He strides forward, snatching up his school top hat and rattling a tattoo on it as if it were a drum.
Princess, the hour is late, the horses wait by the brazen gate. It is our fate, we must away.
With a last derisive thump, he concertinas his hat and flips it into the fire.
Bold Prince Avant, I have an aunt. She's pale and gaunt, and she says I can't. Oh, Tony, Tony, I could dance myself into my grave. And listen, listen. Surely that cannot be only the rising of the wind.
Tony, ferociously.
The house is lone, the trees do groan, and wail and moan. I'll seize the throne. Ho, let's be gone.
Sally reappears, arranged in all the colors of the rainbow. They dance, and in the midst of their dancing the clock outside tolls its first stroke. Solemnly they count the strokes, and at the 12th,
Midnight!
They stand aghast. The wind sweeps moaning round the benighted old house, as if burthened with the music of remote, inhuman instruments and voices. Curtain. End of Act 2. Act 3 of Crossings, a Fairy Play, by Walter de la Mare. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act 3. Butcher, Baker, and Candlestick Maker. Time 11 o'clock, and a frosty winter morning, the 21st of December. Scene: an old-fashioned, gaily painted, stone-flagged sunny kitchen. Hams, bunches of herbs, strings of drying oat-cakes hang from the beams. To the left is a door leading into the house, and beyond it is a brick oven and a kitchen range, its brass and steel merrily twinkling in the flame-light. Beyond the hearth is a casement window, festooned with ivy. At the back of the kitchen is an immense dresser, gaily bedangled with crockery, and flanked with huge cakes, a game pie, a goose, and so on. A door leads out to the pantry. On the right is another door, opening into a scullery and a frosted, sunny, cobble-stoned kitchen garden. Between these two doors is a settle. In the middle stands a kitchen table. A jug with a branch of holly in it is on the table. Pen, paper, and ink, a pastry board, a pestle and mortar, a rolling pin, and a bag of flour. On the other side are Anne's dolls in a row, and a high chair. 4 earthenware hot water bottles, graduated in size, are somewhere in view. A fairy appears in the entry, flaxen-haired, with skin white as frost, but carmine-cheeked and carmine-lipped. She is disguised as an old peddler-woman in a shawl and a steeple hat bound round with elf-flowers, and peeps and peers in at the door from out of the snowy garden. At length she enters, and looks secretly round her, as if furtively seeking for what she cannot find. Fairy, calling softly in what appears to be her own tongue,
Ilakarya, mimsy mum. Ilakarya, mimsy mum.
with odd gestures she puts a posy of elf-flowers beside Anne's dolls, and at the sound of whistling disappears. Mr. Budge's head appears at the casement window. He comes round to the door and knocks with his knuckles, softly whistling the while the tune of Bonnie Dundee. He is a stoutish, reddish, cheerful man of the true blue tradition of butchers, with a shining face fringed with whiskers, and he is dressed in a butcher's blue apron with a scarf wound round his neck. Frances, singing out from above,
Sally, Sally, Mr. Budge in the kitchen.
Sally enters in gay colors, her Bayswater dress inside out, under an apron. Her hair is tied up with cherry-colored ribbons.
Good morning, Mr. Budge. Please come in. And what a lovely, lovely morning.
Mr. Budge, gallantly accepting her invitation,
"'Tis so. A wonderful fine morning, miss, and thank ye kindly. Trees and hedgerows that bedizened with hoarfrost, you might be best man at a wedding. 9 degrees of frost, miss, and that slippy. Old bones must tread cautious like.
Please sit down, Mr. Budge, if you are sure you can spare the time.
Time no object, miss, when I'm sticking your bright smiles away. I've come, miss, not for orders."
He reads rapidly and a little shamefacedly from a long red tradesman's book, which he afterwards deposits on the table.
3 fat turkeys, 5 fat fowl, 4 fat duck, 9-pound pork sausages, 20-pound sirloin, lean, 2 leg of mutton, lean, and 1 choice fat Datchover goose.
Sally looks alarmed.
Now, do 'ee know, miss, I think, maybe, with the other little fiddle faddles, there's enough there on order, miss, so to speak, as should see you all well into the new year, treated cautious like. No, miss, not orders."
He produces 2 sheets of foolscap from an inner pocket, which, with precautionary glances round him, he stealthily pushes across the table.
I've brought ye the second, the supplementary list, as promised, for the grand party, miss.
Oh, Mr. Budge, it is good of you. The very thing. We have sent off the others. And Mrs. Budge really doesn't think we would have any harm in sending invitations to all of these children, even if we don't know any of them?
Harm, miss? No how.
Sally, sagaciously arguing down her own hesitation.
Of course, Mr. Budge, I know one doesn't usually ask strangers to a party, but this won't be a grand party, not a ball, Mr. Budge. And one isn't a stranger as soon as one's a friend, isn't one? And this is the country, isn't it? Not like London, where nobody you know knows anybody until he knows the other person is known to the kind of person he knows. Not even one's neighbors. I can't imagine, Mr. Budge, what should I have done if you had been if you hadn't been a friend too?
'Tis so, miss. Oh, yes, it's the country, sure enough.
Just look at the morning, that dazzling snow. I just keep saying thank you, and what a sweet cold smell the garden sheds, just as if frost flowers. I'm very glad God made the country, Mr. Budge, and so much of it.
'Tis so, miss, and a wonderful fine job of it, too, taken altogether.
You didn't by any chance meet my brother, Mr. Budge?
Mr. Budge looks very solemn, hand to chin, and head on one side.
A square set-up young gentleman, furry cap, leggins, carrying a gun?
Yes.
Well, between you, me, and the deep blue sea, miss, no. But there, I'm astonishin' poor observer. Out of bounds. He'm all safe, miss. He'll follow his stomach. 'Tis so.
Sally, reading slowly from list.
Miss Arabella Louisia Nisba Minch. What a mouth, what a remarkable name.
Very particular lady. Daughter of my Lady Minch. Bullock a week, reg'lar. Lives up at the Hall. We couldn't do without her. But being so open to every eye, miss, so to speak, I forget her in my first.
And of course your own little girl is coming, Mr. Budge. Jemima, isn't it?
Jemima, miss. Mimmy, so called. And bless my soul, Polly, too, when she's particular good. Sartin sure. She'm comin', miss, if you be so kind as to have her.
Has the candlestick maker any nieces or nephews or godchildren or that kind of thing?
Not beknownst to me. Not a Crossings man, miss. Queer chap, too.
Isn't he? I suppose he couldn't make a living, not a real living, only in Crossings, could he? Candlesticks wear out so very, very slowly, Mr. Budge. He knows all the country places, villages, houses, rivers, streams, woods, hills, everything, right down to the very tip of Land's End. He's calling this morning. So is Mr. Honeyman. Mr. Honeyman is going to give my sister Frances a lesson in jam tarts.
Honeyman, ah! Now, if the young gentleman fancies anything in the butchering line.
A dismal cough is heard, and Mr. Honeyman's head appears at window.
Here is Mr. Honeyman.
Mr. Honeyman raps on the door, though he is in full view. He is a long, lank, cadaverous man, with black hair, and is dressed in a cardigan jacket and an apron white with flour.
Good morning, Mr. Honeyman. Do come in and rest a moment. We were just talking of you, weren't we, Mr. Budge? Angels, you know.
Morning, miss. Cold. Morning, Mr. Budge. Angels, miss? Not me. Leastwise, not this side of Jordan. I've called, miss, on pleasure bent, so to speak, signifying not business.
He reads from a long red tradesman's book, which he afterwards deposits on the table.
What with the plum cakes, ice cakes, macaroons, archangels, buns, 3 dozen currant, 6 dozen Bath, and the mince pies and the cheesecakes, and the maids of honor, well, miss, the bakery's all of a smoke.
Sally clasps her hands in dismay. Mr. Honeyman drops his voice and hands her an enormous envelope.
Mrs. Honeyman sent list number 2, the secret list, miss, as promised, for the party.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Honeyman. That's just what I wanted.
Very welcome, miss, I'm sure.
To Budge.
Ever since that morning, Mr. Budge, when the young lady give us that sippet of green, flowery smellin' wine, and me as good as teetotal these 20 years, and no more than on and off my deathbed, so to speak, why,
with a deep breath,
it unfroze me, out and in, clouds and cares and cobwebs. I've been a 10-year younger man for it, Mr. Budge.
'Tis so.
Musingly.
A thrillin' balsam for sure.
Aside to Honeyman.
And that's why Mrs. Budge, she says to me, take along the book wi' Budge, in black and white, just to warn the poor morsel.
I.
Sally, gazing at Mr. Honeyman's list, but with faraway eyes, thinking of the 2 books.
Mr. Honeyman!
Meaning me, miss, to be sure.
Was my Aunt Susan a great eater?
Eater, miss? Well, now, eater? Which is to say, loaves, cakes, rusks, biscuits, etc. per day, per week, per annum. That's what might be called a conundrum, miss. There was she, poor Letty. There was the 3 maids growed in their respectful ages about her like willows round a tombstone. There was old Tom Wetherill the gardener, and the boy. Eaters one and all, miss.
Very sagaciously.
But to subtract and divide the summum total, miss, per appetite? Well, as I was saying, there I'm asked. Be I by the book, Mr. Budge?
Words bein' words, Mr. Honeyman, 'tis so. But age bein' age, miss, and teeth in the descendant, I'd say not a remarkable meat eater. And now, poor dear lady, she'm gone beyond it.
I see, but now, bills, Mr. Budge. I've heard my father sometimes speak of bills, you know, and I suppose, of course, my Aunt Susan was very particular. She just settled, I mean.
Settled, miss. The very word. And reg'lar. Think of that, Mr. Honeyman.
Mr. Honeyman violently shakes his head, but Mr. Budge blunders on.
Mebbe now, miss, you put dainty head to window last night, and saw nigh full moon, making as you might say a dead set at crossings up aloft there?
A fuller moon, considering her size, I never observed this 20 year gone. A moon for lovers, miss, and parted.
'Tis so. Well, now, skies keeping clear, and you in due course with comely form at window, what do us, you, me, and Mr. Honeyman yonder, what do us gauge Providence on? Come another month, gone, another lunatic month?
Sally ponders the riddle brightly.
Why, full moon again, Mr. Budge.
Mr. Budge, slapping his leg, and with a rapturous guffaw.
There, miss, I led it to it. The wits of ye. Full moon again, Mr. Budge.
In solemn triumph.
Well, that's how Miss Susan paid her bills, miss. Reg'lar as full moon. 'Tis so.
Sally sits, pale and wide-eyed, staring at the books. Mr. Honeyman, uneasily.
But there, miss, it weren't bills Mr. Budge and me was making our call for, in respects to which, it bein' agreed there's 2 sides to 'em, and the king's head not bein', so to speak, so much as come into view. No, what Mrs. Honeyman was taking the liberty of suggesting is this ways. You've been so kind as to ax our little Emily to the party and all. She'm a neat, quiet, handy little soul, and remarkable wishful to come and give a hand to the housework. Hard soilin' work, and pretty lettuce hands. There, miss, I'm not an oratory. She'd just jump for joy.
Sally takes his hands.
And we'd be overjoyed to have her, Mr. Honeyman. Not, of course, to work, but to share. Please tell Mrs. Honeyman.
There, there, miss, say no more. It's the kind thoughts, the inward wishings of the heart.
Confidentially.
3 weeks ago, come tomorrow, doctor, he says to me, Honeyman, what with your brooding only on the dark side, and with them teeth not being able to domesticate your food as a Christian should, and refusing all physic, why, Honeyman, he said, If you keep on like this, come Christmas you'll be in your grave, or a madhouse. And now, miss, your kind thoughts and little bottles and advice and such. But there, flattery never buttered no parsnips.
Turns away, throws his hands up, and with fierce astonishment,
There's customers here. Why, in crossings, miss, as stick their proud noses into the Lord's heaven fairly sniffin' for the last trump.
sits down exhausted. Mr. Budge, ruminatingly,
Ay, Mr. Honeyman, 'tis so, 'tis so.
Francis heard without.
This way, Mr. Candlestick Maker. Come along.
Frances enters, peacocked up in brilliant colors, her Bayswater clothes inside out. She is followed by the candlestick maker, who stays on the threshold, looking in. He has come out of the old nursery rhyme, is related to the Pied Piper, wears a dark green cape or cloak and hat, and carries an odd-shaped fiddle. Anne follows.
Good morning, Mr. Budge. Good morning, Mr. Honeyman.
Good morning, Mr. Budge. Good morning, Mr. Honeybee. The water in my jug and basin was iced this morning.
You don't say so, missy.
Anne, discovering fairy flowers.
Oh, Sally, look, look! Aren't they beautiful?
To herself.
I know them.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Budge. How very kind of you.
Not my giving, miss. Though maybe missy mid find a few berries on this fork of holly.
He gives Anne a spray of holly.
Then they must have been from you, Mr. Honeyman. Aren't they lovely?
Not me, miss, but here's a kissin' green spriggit of mistletoe Emily put in my hat for the little leddikin.
He gives her a sprig of mistletoe.
Who can have put them there, then?
She shows them to Mr. Budge, who squints and sniffs at them with curiosity. As he does so, Sally lifts her head abruptly as if she had been called, and sees the candlestick maker. For a few moments she stands motionless, gazing at him unobserved, then turns back to the table. Frances, rolling up her sleeves and brandishing the rolling pin.
Ready. Aye, ready, Mr. Honeyman. What's the lesson to be today?
The jam tart, if you please, miss, which is to say the jam puff also, and the maid of honor, time permittin'.
Mr. Honeyman proceeds to give Frances her cookery lesson. A gay whistling is heard. Tony and the beggarman is seen to cross the window and then appear at the door. Tony is thickly muffled up, in leggings, fur cap, etc., and carries a faggot of wood, a rook rifle, and a dead rook. The beggarman is gaunt and elongated, with hair like an ancient thatch. He blinks like a cat, looks as hungry as a hawk, and carries a stick cut from a wayside hedge, and a penny whistle.
Morning, Mr. Budge. Morning, Mr. Honeyman. I've brought a gentleman friend, Sally, for a mug of cider. Helped me collar this game. 2 more friends in the wood. Won't come in. Shy.
He throws down the faggot by the fire, hangs the rook on a beam, and goes out to fetch a jug of cider with which he returns. Mugs are passed round. Mr. Budge, to Beggarman.
Travelin'?
Beggarman, in chanting nasal voice.
Here today and gone tomorrow, now to buy with, now to borrow. Come the night shine packs down all, ring poor Robin's funeral. Cold mumpin' on last week's crust.
To candlestick maker.
You and the mump?
Candlestick maker nods. The merry company sip and talk. Mr. Budge rises. Mr. Budge, to Sally.
What I'd make bold to say, miss, seeing as how music's provided, all being friendly like together, sun climbing high, and Christmas wearing near, maybe this gentleman would oblige the company with a song.
A song, a song,
a song, a song, a song.
The beggarman goes to the door, and thrusting his head out of it, pipes a note or two on his whistle. Beggarman, to Sally.
Me friends is a little fly leddy, what you wouldn't call company folk, but give 'em the key, they yawps like nightingales.
He sings.
Now all the roads to London town are windy white with snow. They're shouting and cursing and snortings to and fro. But when night hangs her 100 lamps and the snickering frost fires creep. Then still old dale and hill, oh, snows fallen deep.
Distant chorus from without. Then still, oh, dale and hill, oh, snows fallen deep.
The gardener cups his leathery wrap, the ostler shouts "Gee-wo!" The farm dog grunts and sniffs and snuffs, bleat sheep and cattle blow. Soon Moll and Nan and Dream are laid, and snoring Dick's asleep. Then still old dale and hill, oh, snows fallen deep.
Distant chorus from without. Then still, oh, dale and hill, oh, snows fallen deep.
A good song, a rare good song, and as neat a brace of nightingales as ever I heard. Rough, but tunesome, I warrant the sound on't trilled the air for miles around.
A rare song, a powerful song, and that pipe too. Something in the nature of a flaglet, I take it. Mrs. Honeyman's Uncle Israel now, rest his soul, was a sore spry performer on the French horn.
To Mr. Budge.
Do 'ee think, Mr. Budge, the company might be cheered by Fold old Do?
To Sally.
There be grand makers of music in these parts, miss.
He hums the air. To Beggarman.
Perhaps you would lift your voice in the topmost line, and you, sir.
To Candlestick Maker.
Might make a commitment of the second. Mr. Budge trills a rare rich tenor, and me full bass. Now then, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all together.
Fold, all do, and the south wind blowing, oh. Fold, all do, and green growth growing, oh. Fold, all do, and the heart inside me knowing, oh. 'Tis merry, merry month of May. Fold, all do, shrill chanticleers are growing, oh. Fold, all do, and the mower's soon a mowing, oh. Oh, lovelier than the lilac tree, my lovely love to showing, oh, in merry, merry month of May.
Loud applause. Mr. Budge to Sally.
An old catch that, and a favorite to little crossings these 100 years gone. Time and tide, miss, but never was mornin' wasted sweeter. A very good day to 'ee, and good day all.
Tony, having filled the beggarman's pockets with loaves, pies, a bone of sirloin, a cold chicken, etc., follows him out. Frances to Anne.
Come along, mummykins.
Anne to Mr. Honeyman.
Frances and Anne goin' for a walk, Mr. Honeybee, in the woods. See Jack Frosts, I do, in long cloaks like candlestick men, and hats ever so high.
Mr. Honeyman, stooping and smoothing her hair with his long bony fingers.
You don't say so, missy. Sharp eyes, missy. Not but what there be queer comings and goings in Crossings woods, as I've heard tell.
To Sally, nodding his head towards Frances.
She'm that light and nimble with her fingers.
Frances and Anne go out.
Good day, miss, and joy to your party. 'Twere a dark life that showed naught but shadows. And don't 'ee worrit head over that there book, miss. Less purse-proud young leddy I never saw.
He goes out. Sally sighs, then turns in feigned surprise at seeing the candlestick maker.
Oh, Mr. Candlestick Maker, what a wasted morning.
Wasted?
Nothing done.
She begins to peel potatoes, he to polish a copper pan.
And yet, Mr. Candlestick Maker, we are not, being torpid. That's what his housemaster said Tony was, torpid. There's Tony now. I think he learns more in one day in the woods than he did in a whole term at school, even in that queer company. Yesterday afternoon he came home, just green, and was oh so ill. He had been smoking a clay pipe, shag he called it, and he vowed he wouldn't smoke again until he could be without being ill. And what Tony vows to himself, Mr. Candlestick Maker, he sticks to. If only he would vow to be not bottom of his form, but just next to the bottom, next term. You'll learn much quicker by experience, don't you? Now, I know that butchers have hearts which they don't hang up on hooks in their shops. Now I know that one gets cross when one's tired, and not merely because of aunts, or nieces, and things. Now I know whatever happens, the country is always here, and the sunshine, and the woods, and the light, and the music of all of it. What kind of life was yours, Mr. Candlestick Maker, when you were younger?
Mine? Just going round with the world, up hill, down dale.
These crossing woods, Mr. Candlestick Maker, I sometimes think they come into the house. All the day the dry twigs are whispering, and the wind is full of voices, and sometimes in the dead of night I waken as if a bell had just ceased ringing. I listen, and it is as if I heard little pattering footsteps and high crickety voices in the garden.
Night's full of strangeness, and there's a pretty wide hymn between wake and dream.
Yes, Mr. Candlestick Maker. Now Anne is a strange child. She will sit for hours quiet alone in these little old rooms. I have come in, and it is as if she had just stopped talking to someone. There couldn't be a ghost, I suppose, that could talk to the child, could there? I'm not afraid, only a little trembly and excited. And now that it's near full moon time, one lies awake as if one were leagues and leagues under the sea. Is that like sleeping in the woods?
Yes, but a bigger bed, and many candles, and the sigh of the whole world turning in its sleep.
And do you lie on your back and see the stars rocking in the trees, the chair, the Pleiades, and Charlie's Wain? Do they stretch far, crossing woods?
Miles on miles, to the world's end.
And nothing stirring, only the little night beasts and the nightingales? Is their song very sorrowful in the summertime, Mr. Candlestick Maker? As sorrowful, as the poem says.
Well, it is what you might call compounded. Now you would think he would crack his little skull for joy, and now he will wail like a churchyard of widows. As for nothing stirring, there are strange busyings in Crossings woods, some moonlight nights.
A small, strange countenance peeps in at the window.
Here? These woods?
Stirrings, whisperings, trumpetings, a shaking of leaves, lights gleaming and scattering, more than I could make candlesticks for. In these parts, they say, every century a revelling of the silent is held, and a queen is crowned. They are like the bees, they flock from all countries of the world, Kamchatka to Peru. It is the Queen's region, Crossings woods.
An unearthly minglement of light and shade, as if the sun were in eclipse, dims into the sky. The fire begins to roar.
You don't mean, Mr. Candlestick Maker, the little people?
An outlandish whining voice is heard droning. Sally draws herself in like a snail. The Candlestick Maker stands, a peculiar smile on his face. Fairy, without.
Of your nevolent nature, spare a crust for a creature, a drink and a dole for a homeless soul.
Sally, strangely moved.
What voice is that? I have heard it in a dream, somewhere, surely stranger. It's not in one's own mind.
Fairy, without.
Of slumber but tossings, white the rime in bare crossings. Cold is shed, barn and byre, Letty, a coal from your fire, Letty.
A fairy appears, disguised, hooded and hatted fantastically as a peddler, with a crutch and a tray of ribbons, knick-knackery, etc. Fairy, speaking as if in a language not her own.
Day's greetings, Mamazella, day's greetings, and to thee, wanderer.
She throws up her hands in salutation, and looks at him shrewdly from under her hood.
Greetings, greetings. Are you hungry?
She offers a platter of bread.
Cold? Please seat yourself at the fire.
Fairy, refusing the food.
Nay, not for eating.
Thirsty?
She offers the fairy cider in a little mug. The fairy takes the mug and flips a few drops from it on stepstone and lintel, muttering.
Halaiaba miren heist. Stars light your dark eyes, Mamazella. Frost rose your cheeks, Mamazella. Birds' tongues of April be in your mouth, Mamazella, and sea foam to your fingers. A weesome, loosome, flaxen childerkin dwells here.
Sally, to Candlestick Maker.
She means Anne?
The Candlestick Maker keeps his eyes fixed on the fairy, who peers this way and that, rocking her body to and fro the while with a slow rhythmic motion.
Nay, lady, I ask but to make known, Mamazella. There's many a pretty bauble here for your choosing, many a pretty bauble.
How much are they?
Not but a wee small handful of her pretty hairlocks, Mamazella. Now, Gabali, enough to keep a Jenny Wren snug?
But my sister is not here, and what do you want them for?
Fairy, mumbling.
Ah, Mamazella, a bargain's a bargain, a gift, a gift. Queens must be crowned, ribbons, shoe ties, pretty laces, and oh, sleepy odors. The bosom to lull when the swart raven yells, and the taper burns dull.
Mr. Candlestick Maker, she frightens me.
Candlestick Maker, to the fairy.
The lady says the child is not within. I cross my thumbs.
He spreads out his hands, their thumbs crossed, high and menacingly above his head. Fairy whines.
Ay, my good gentleman. But where go the children, there go we. Mischief none to them that wish us well.
She casts him a prolonged, searching glance, and, muttering, turns away, but thrusts suddenly her head in at the doorway again, and cries incantation or imprecation upon him. On her going, the sunlight brightens into the kitchen once more. Sally, swiftly returning to herself.
Poor, poor old thing! I can't let her go like that.
She hastens out, calling.
Peddler! Peddler!
A whistling is heard, and Tony enters.
I say, who's the old woman? A mighty quick walker.
Sally returns, her left hand on her breast.
She refused everything except a penny with a hole in it, and she gave me this, a frost flower, like those in Anne's little bunch.
The Candlestick Maker crosses over to the doorway and stares uneasily out over the snow.
Well, she is out of our sight, and I too must be gone. There are few paths in Crossings Woods when snow comes down. I would keep the little maid maybe at home after dusk.
And you'll not be coming again, Mr. Candlestick Maker? You'll not... Do you by any chance make copper candle snow lanterns, Mr. Candlestick Maker? And would you make one for me?
Aye.
Musingly gazing at her.
Any light that lightens the way. 'Tis a long journey for all. I'll come again.
He goes out. Sally watches him a while, then comes in. Tony has begun to chop up wood for kindling.
Queer fellow that, Sally.
Sally, not hearing him, as she broodingly sings to herself.
And the taper burns low, Tony.
Yes, Sally.
My dear, if you should be going out in the dead of night again, would you just tap as you pass at my door? I heard your footsteps, and I listened and listened, and there were the frosty stars blazing, and I thought, you know, why, that you must be a ghost-o-legs.
Did you, Sally? I'm sorry. The snow. I only went trapping.
I suppose your gentleman friends are only resting in the woods. They eat a good deal, Tony. And perhaps Aunt Bayswater, you know.
They're all right, Sally. I keep them at arm's length.
Sally, kissing him.
Yes, my dear, and I'm glad it's a friendly arm. Oh, how I love it all, just being myself, just opening my eyes in the quietness, just breathing, Still, it's a little lonely and anxious sometimes. Not a word from father, and these strangers. You are the man of the house, Tony, and such a comfort.
Trust me, Sally. That candlestick maker now, he's a queer chap. What is his real job? I suppose he didn't jump out of a rotten potato.
My dear, he helped me peel all these. He is so practical.
I'll keep my eye on him. What makes you anxious, Sally?
Oh, Tony, the bills, and...
Frances and Anne come in, laden with holly and box. Anne, in burning excitement,
Us met such a funny, queer lady in the woods, Sally. She did come and touch me with her fingers, and stroked my hair, and stooped at me like a icicle. And we runned and runned. I wouldn't have runned. I liked that lady, I did.
Sally sits down, deeply troubled.
Oh, France, I'm thankful you ran away. She came here too. She frightened me. And the candlestick maker says the woods are dangerous. At night. That music, that singing, you know. And France, they were both very kind. Mr. Budge and Mr. Honeyman, I mean. But we must owe them pounds and pounds and pounds. I daren't even look in the books. And Mr. Budge says that Aunt Susan paid absolutely everything sharp at full moon. It's nearly full moon now.
She turns out a large leather housekeeper's purse.
My dear, 2 pounds, 15 shillings, and 5 pence. It just means we're ruined. What shall I do? And the party, too.
Anne, sliding up and patting Sally's hand.
Nan not hungry, Sally. Cheer up, Miss Sallykins.
Do, Sally? Why, that's quite simple. We must make a clean breast of it, I suppose. Just disorder everything and fast. I did feel a little bilious this morning, too. I'll cook the cookery for the party, and Tony shall make the ginger beer. Let's write now.
I say, that's a bit of humble pie, isn't it?
I'd sooner eat humble pie than proud pudding any day. At least here.
They gather round the table, Sally in the middle, Tony sprawling on one side of her, Frances on the other. Anne, with a scrap of paper and a large pencil, draws up a small chair in front of the table and kneels down beside it. Frances, writing,
My dear Mr. Budge, the Miss Wildershams send their compliments and regrets, and beg that the turkeys and the ducks and the chickens and the...
A fairy peeps in at the door. A fairy peers in at the window.
Nan will write fairies, Nan will. Poor Sally. Fairy money.
Curtain. End of Act 3. Act 4 of Crossings, a Fairy Play by Walter de la Mare. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act 4, Humans and Inhumans. Time, 4 o'clock and winter twilight, the 23rd of December. Scene, the outskirts of Little Crossings woods, deep in snow. A gabled angle of Crossings is seen in the distance, with lattice windows under its overhanging eaves. Icily still, clotted with snow, the trees of garden and woods brood over the scene. In the foreground stands a rounded hut, such as may be seen encircling the North Pole. A fire burns fiercely in a bucket, set up, night watchman fashion, on 2 bricks. Sally sits darning on a garden chair beside a rough wood table on which tea things are spread. An immense basketful of stockings lies beside her in the snow. She is so muffled up in a gaudy-colored shawl and scarves that her small dark face is hardly visible. Frances is stooping low over the fire, reading by its flame light a novelette. Sally, solemnly peering over her needle.
Tell me, immortal sister, do gravediggers work at Christmas?
Frances, absently.
Gravediggers, Sally?
Because, my dear, if this kind of thing goes on, we shall be frozen stiff by then, and extremely awkward and brittle to handle.
Frances, mumbling.
I don't care what happens to my old body when I'm out of it. It will have to do its job first, though.
She wakes out of her reading for an instant.
I'm going to be absolutely free, without being detestable.
She relapses once more into her novelette.
Don't care, France. Wasn't iced to death, but stewed till he was done. I should enjoy a little gentle simmering myself just now. My extremities, as Aunt Bayswater used to say, have simply stopped being alive.
She softly stamps her feet in the snow.
This Esquimaux's tea of Tony's is a perfectly crazy idea. But what an angel he has been these last few days.
Frances, mumbling.
Tony wants to sleep out.
Sleep out?
In that.
She nods toward the snow hut.
He says our breaths would keep us warm.
Sally, flinging down her darning and thrusting more sticks on the fire.
Oh, France, if it weren't for those hideous bills, and the party, and...
She looks covertly round her in the deepening winter gloom.
And that! We have made a frightful muddle of everything. I saw Mr. Budge look at Mr. Honeyman.
The truth is, you old head on young shoulders, you just worry. What's the good? Why not let things be what you want them to be until, well, they come different?
But you see, France, it's Aunt Susan. She trusted us. It was a kind of faith. I see it now. And when you go finding out, in your grave too, that it's no good hoping that people will do what they won't do, not even when you are in your grave. Why?
Emily comes scurrying along from the house. She is a flaxen, solemn child, with narrow shoulders and skimpy yellow hair, and might be the Mad Hatter's small sister. She is carrying a large earthenware jam jar tied up with a ribbon in a frill of vermilion paper. Sally, admiring the jam jar.
How extremely artistic, Emily.
She peeps in and tastes its contents with a wooden spoon.
And strawberry.
Yes, miss. Thank you, miss. That's how me Aunt Tupper does the geraniums. And please, miss, if you'll excuse me, there might be a drop or two of blood on the bread and butter. I've cut me thumb.
She holds it aloft in its bandage against the wintry sky.
Oh, Emily, not deep?
To the weary bone. But it's doing quite nicely, thank you, miss. And I left the kettle boiling over, so tea won't be no time.
She scuttles off towards the house. A jangling of bells is heard, and Tony comes in from the right in a pair of old top boots and a fur coat inside out, with his rook rifle over his shoulder and a cowboy's whip. He is leading the Budge's bobtail, harnessed to a sled, from out of a shapeless bundle from which presently emerges Anne's fair head.
Whoa there, Jugger. Hang on, Nan.
Sally, lifting Anne out.
Not cold? Not shiver-shaky all down the spinicums, Mummykins? Quite sure?
I'm in an oven, Sally, and we spilled out into the snow, and Jugga barked, and Tony barked, and the wood barked, and there! What did Tony and Nan see? Two little buzzin' steeple hats, like posts in the snow, starin' at us between the trees. And Tony runned, and Jugga runned, and the trees runned, and here we are. And please, Sally dear, may I have my tea in the snow house?
Come on, Nan, crawl in. The snow's like glass, France. Reading that stuff, you old snail. Stick a needle into her, Sally.
Anne, from inside the snow hut.
Stick a needle into her, Sally.
Frances, mumbling absently.
All right, Tony. Just end of chapter.
Sally, anxiously.
Did you see the steeple hats, Tony?
Before he can answer, Emily scurries in again with a huge kitchen teapot in one hand and black iron kettle to match in the other. She is followed by Mrs. Budge, a hummocky little woman with a large bright face, who is carrying, baby fashion, a newspaper parcel containing a leg of mutton, its woolly shank dangling down outside.
If you please, miss, Mrs. Budge have called.
There, France, it's all over.
To Mrs. Budge.
I am glad to see you, Mrs. Budge. Please sit down and make yourself very, very comfortable. The children, that is, we, are having an Esquimaux's tea. I hope you won't feel the cold.
Mrs. Budge, doubtfully.
Dear no, miss. Not if it won't be what might be called a lingering meal. I was coming across the fields, Crossings way, miss, so I've brought you tomorrow's gint. To see in the turkey like. Hung to a nicety, says Mr. Budge, and just ripe for eating.
Sally, removing the paper.
What a beauty, Mrs. Budge. And that fur. They don't grow legs like that in London. It's the handsomest I've ever seen.
She puts the leg on an empty chair and stoops over it as if to collect her thoughts.
You know, Mrs. Budge, it's very curious that you should come at this moment. My sister and I were just talking of the...
That's one thing, miss, and the next be Mr. Budge. He sends his respects for your kind letter, and which he'll answer himself, business being business, in due course, he says. But first, he's wishful to thank you for that 'mazing little bottle of liniment you sent him for his poor lumbago. Him in the draughty shop, all withers and all. And there, miss, you'd hardly be believing it, but pain went moment of using, having flown straight to the throat, and so out, please God. And lo!
Pausing to take breath, and gazing about her.
Lo, what a fine house the young gentleman's built hisself. We haven't seen such a winter in Little Crossings, miss, since Mr. Budge broke his chopper on a bullock's heart.
Sally, absently.
Really?
Attentively.
Really? But what I was going to say, Mrs. Budge, is...
As for Jew in Little Crossings, Mr. B says, or shadow of Jew, he says, why...
Emily, rushing in almost speechless excitement.
If you please, miss, the vicarage lady, miss, Miss Welcome, miss, and Miss Josephine.
Who, Emily? France. Miss Welcome. What did she say, Emily?
She says, she, is Miss Wittersham's at home, and I says I, as miss, home she be. Step in, miss, I says, and in she steps.
Good gracious, France, what shall we do?
Tony leaps into the sled and burrows under the rugs. Sally hastens a few steps towards the house, but too late. Her visitors are seen approaching. Miss Julia Welcome, a lady in the height of middle age, square, sagacious, inimitably imperturbable, with a rather masculine voice and manner, and Josephine, her niece, a handsome, spirited girl of about 16, with red hair. Miss Welcome, richly enjoying the scene.
So, here we are. A winter picnic. Most seasonable. How do you do, Miss Wildersham? This is my niece, Josephine.
Anne slowly thrusts her head out of the snow house, tortoise fashion, and instantly bobs back again. Sally, shy but undaunted.
How do you do, Miss Welcome? It's kind of you to come. This is my sister Frances. And that's Tony.
Tony emerges.
We are having an Esquimau's tea. In the snow, you know. I do hope you won't think the weather is not quite warm enough. This is Mrs. Budge, a very old friend of ours.
Ah, and an old friend of mine, too. How do you do, Mrs. Budge?
Nicely, ma'am, thank ye.
An Eskimo tea. An excellent idea. What do you think, Josephine?
She sits down on the chair containing the leg of mutton, which Sally deftly removes in the nick of time and places on another chair.
Rather, Aunt Julie. Heavenly.
To Frances.
What a stunning fire. And a sledge.
They begin to talk and laugh together in the flame light. Tony, suddenly conscious apparently of his boots, gazes at Josephine and looks foolish. Sally swathes up Miss Welcome in a rug and proceeds to pour out tea. Miss Welcome, tucking herself in.
There. Snugness itself, Miss Wildersham. A respirator and some of that delicious toast, and we're perfect. What is death in a good cause, Mrs. Budge? Ah, here's the vicar.
Mr. Welcome, very black against the snow, is led out by Emily. He is nearing 60, lean, gold spectacle, shrewd, good-humoured, and stoops a little.
Here we are, Jeremy, an Eskimo tea. This is Miss Wildersham.
Mr. Welcome takes Sally's hands.
So this is Miss Wildersham. This is Miss Sally. Delightful. Splendid. And Scrums, what a fire. Ah, Mrs. Budge, there you are, keeping a sharp lookout on your 10 toes, I see.
To Sally.
35 years ago, my dear, antiquity that I am, on this very spot I made her first snowman for your dear mother. Alas, he thawed.
Turning to Frances.
And this is?
Frances. And Tony.
Come, Jeremy. Sit down and dare the elements.
Mr. Welcome, musingly, glancing about him.
Now, tell me, O nieces and nephews of an adorable aunt, how are we swimming along? How are we managing? Bless my heart, Julia, how Susan would have enjoyed this. And by gum, as Mr. Plush used to say, what a world.
To Sally.
Confide in me, my dear. I have been young, and now am younger. Are we happy? Just inconsumably, incomprehensibly happy, like that old fire there in the bucket.
Mumbling.
There will soon be ashes.
Sally, glancing out into the woods.
We are living and learning, Mr. Welcome. We are indeed, and all the time. And crossings, and the country. Happy. We are as happy as the days are.
Short, my dear. Short and few, I expect, if bronchitis has anything to say to it.
That's just what I was saying to Francis, and yet sometimes I wonder, you know, Miss Welcome, if people would ever be ill at all if there weren't so many things to be ill of. It's the names that set one off.
Bravo, my dear. The names, the names. Never say die till you call in the doctor. Now, if I walked by faith and not by sight, I should just wriggle into that snow house and be roast blubber ever after.
Tony cracks his whip.
Josephine, my dear, be careful. Jeremy, warn the child.
Yoicks, tally-ho! Off we go over the snow and... Hang on, Joe.
Tony whisks Josephine off on the sledge at a gallop, and at this moment Emily once more scuttles in, a loaf in one hand and a tin of biscuits in the other, calling out as she runs,
Oh, miss, me Lady Minch, miss, and mother, miss, I've asked him out.
Silence, in which Lady Minch presently appears out of the distance, little, peering, testy, in all tints of purple. She is followed by Mrs. Honeyman, black and gaunt, in her best bugled bonnet and shawl. Miss Welcome, chuckling, and aside to Mr. Welcome.
Louisa, Jeremy.
To Sally.
What my brother calls, naughty man, a holy terror.
To Lady Minch.
Ah, Louisa, you see you have caught us on the spree. An Eskimo tea. Sit down, Louisa, and return to our youth.
What's that? Foolish young person brought me out here. Burst pipes?
Greenland. Lapland, Louisa. Do as Lapland does.
Lady Minch, peering at Sally.
What's that there? What do you call that? A squaw?
A squaw, Louisa. This is Miss Wildersham, dear Susan's niece.
Lady Minch, blinking closely.
How do you do?
Mr. Welcome leads her toward the table.
Now then, rugs, blankets, quilts, hot water bottles.
Hot water bottles, sir. Yes, sir.
To Mrs. Honeyman.
Sit down, mother. There may be more a-comin'.
She chatters off through the snow.
Are you crazy, Julia? Tea here? Preposterous.
High tea, Louisa. Penguin pie, bear sandwiches, walrus broth.
After heated objections, Lady Minch is at last persuaded to join the party and to sit down. She instantly rebounds with a faint scream. Mrs. Budge, extracting the joint.
Only a leg of mutton, me lady.
Lady Minch reseats herself and is soothed down and tucked up. Emily staggers in, laden with blankets and hot water bottles.
Come along, Emily. 3-bottle lady, 2-bottle gentleman. Ahoy there, more rugs.
There, Lady Minch, you must be quite cozy.
Tony, out of the distance.
Rugs ahoy!
He is seen with a lantern, ascending a ladder to an upper window.
There, Louisa, you are the belle of the ball.
Lady Minch, unappeased.
Julia, ball indeed. I'm perishing by inches.
Sally, as if inspired.
Quick, France, the fairy wine.
Bringing Mrs. Honeyman to the tea table.
Please sit down, Mrs. Honeyman. Sugar?
2 and a titty, if you please, miss.
Oh, Mrs. Honeyman, here we are then. Mad as hatters Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. March hares the rest of the week, and Sundays sufficient unto the day, and so the world wags.
Indeed it do, sir. Wags and wags.
And how's your husband? I hope in better spirits.
I goes on worrying, sir, but I'm bound to say not so low as he were. The young lady very kindly give him a cordial, sir, what have eased him more than all the doctor's physics, which he never could be forced to swallow these 10 years gone. He don't fumigate it so, which
gloomily shaking her head.
Ain't to say that the contrary-wise hasn't its dangers. As I says to him, it's not them, Honeyman, as keeps a watchful eye on the dark side of things, does all the squinting. It's a dark world, sir.
Oh, Mrs. Honeyman, black as my hat. But
And he proves his assertion.
even that, you see, has a silver lining.
Beyond the outskirts of the snowbound party appears now a fairy, in monstrous disguise, ducketing and peering out from behind a huddled thorn. The day is dwindling into dark, and already the moon casts lean black shadows across the fire-flushed snow. A trembling music stirs in the frosty twigs. The company chatters on. Francis brings in the fairy wine. Mr. Welcome takes one of the tiny glasses, sips, and relapses into meditation. Lady Minch, nursing, as best she can in her blankets, a large kitchen cup and saucer, and an immense slice of bread and butter.
What did I always maintain, Julia? It's in the family. Drink you may eradicate, and sound